Anybody know any good books? Well, I mean, it depends. What do you want to read about? Nevada Sierra. I haven't tried that one. Although I do enjoy the Colorado Rapids beer, Coors. It depends. Like, what do you want to read? Like, what subjects are you interested in, Mister EAP123? Reading books is tricky because reading books, it requires so much brain power to read a book. Like, you can't read a book if you're really hungry. If you're really hungry, it's hard to read a book. You got to have some starch. Human psychology, I can't help you there. I don't read books on psychology. But reading books is tricky. You really have to set time to read. I've heard of people just reading at literally any moment of freedom that they have. So, like on the bus or on the subway or while they're waiting in line at the DMV. Like, people will read books at any sort of moment, but at any sort of moment where they have time to kill. But that's hard for me because I really need to sit down and spend at least an hour to read through a book. I also read slow. I don't read fast. You have people who are like, I read, a book a week or something. I'm just like, how do you do that? I don't know how. Unless you're reading like really modern books that are, I don't know, self-help books where the sentences are triple spaced. Yeah, I could see getting the book done in a couple of days. But I mean, the book that I read the fastest was Bill O'Reilly's autobiography. I think I read that book in about 2 days. And that was literally just me reading on my bed before going to sleep. Like, that didn't take me that long at all. So we're back to the confession thing again. Listen, if you don't want to have a voice debate where I can see your face, that's it. I think we've talked enough about this. We're talking about books now, okay? So we're now in Ted's book club. So yeah, exactly. It's easy to get distracted when you're reading, especially with the iPhone generation, with the iPhone era. You have to just reserve an hour of your day, or at least 30 minutes, to just sit down and read. Like, no iPhones, no computer. You can play music because music can really help block out any sort of noise. And just sit down and read, and if you get a page done, you get 2 pages done. Okay, you got 2 pages done. The next day, rinse and repeat. And that's how I read. Sometimes I get 5 pages done. Sometimes I get 10 pages done. Sometimes I can get 20 pages done. But I try to get some pages done each day. I try to. And, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Now, I believe that the reason why reading is challenging for us nowadays is because of social media. That is the reason why, especially things like Instagram. Instagram is almost like a drug where you follow some pages. So let's say you're like me, you're interested in gardening, right? And you find a gardening page. It's just totally dedicated to gardening. This guy's just taking pictures of his plants all the time. You're like, oh, I want to follow this guy because you want to follow somebody that familiarizes with you. That's what us humans are always doing. We're always trying to find others who familiarize with us. If we find someone who doesn't familiarize with us, if we find someone who's totally just blank, their brains are just blocked out to whatever we're interested in, we tend to not talk to those people because they're just not interesting to talk to. So you follow that gardening page, or let's say you're interested in, I don't know, car racing or something. You find the car racing page. You follow that page, and then guess what? You find another page very quickly. Seconds later, you'll find another page. You click, oh, I'm going to follow this page. Before you know it, you're following like 20 different pages. And then the algorithm just kicks right in to where you have posts coming from other gardening pages that you haven't even followed yet. So you're just looking at post after post after post, and your brain is locked in with that quick stimulation that it wants. And you do that for a while, your brain becomes mush. So then you're trying to read, and the book is not giving you that automatic stimulation that you're seeking. It doesn't give it to you. So it's more difficult to read. And it's easier to get distracted because your brain at that moment is not getting what it wants. You see? That is how social media has destroyed reading, everyone. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little story from memory lane. It was the year 2007 when I really began. I think it was, pretty certain it was 07 when I really began to read seriously. And the first book that I started reading seriously was a book by Jim DeMint. I forget the name of the title, but the title, it was about why the founding fathers wanted a moral America. It was a good book. It was well researched, and it made very good points as to how the founding fathers would not approve of the things that we are seeing today. And it talked about how, the founding fathers believed that the Constitution was written for moral and righteous people and for religious people, et cetera, et cetera. And it made some very good arguments, and that was a book that I read through literally while in economics class. So I would go to class, economics, which was, I think, an hour and a half long class. And I would just sit there as the teacher was going on and on about whatever. I would read this book. And what's amazing is that I had the ability to read the book fluidly and not allow the teacher's words to distract my brain. So then there was another book that I started reading. It was called, I think it was called How Christianity Changed the World, or something. No, it was called The Great Divide. I think that was the name of the book. It was written by a professor named Charles Schmidt, who was a professor at Concordia University in, I want to say in St. Louis, Missouri. And this book was about the differences between Islam and Christianity. Very well researched book. I would read that book in the school bus. The school bus is the most noisiest place ever, okay? Extremely noisy. People nonstop talking, laughing, cracking jokes, whatever. People even having sex on the school bus. Yes, I did see this several times going to the school bus. People would literally have sex in the school bus, yes. And they acted as if nobody saw them, but everybody did. People be having sex in the school bus, cracking jokes in the school bus, laughing in the school bus, fighting in the school bus, arguing in the school bus, people doing all sorts of stuff on the school bus. I'd be sitting there reading about the differences between Christianity and Islam fluidly with great interest. And then there was another book that I started reading. It was called How Christianity Changed the World, also by Alvin Schmidt. And I started reading that book. Noise in the background didn't bother me. So I look back and I'm like, wait, I was able to read books in the noisiest of places and not get distracted. I would read the book fluidly, not get distracted. But now I have difficulty reading. What happened? And then it clicks in my mind. Oh, now I know what happened. In those days, I didn't have an iPhone. I had one of those little Nokia phones. It wasn't even a flip phone. It was a little Nokia phone. Little tiny Nokia phone. There was no internet. Texting was not part of my plan. That phone was only for one thing and one thing alone, and that was making phone calls. And I rarely made phone calls on that phone. Rarely. I wasn't asking for girls' numbers. Well, a couple of times here and there. I wasn't talking to friends on that phone. I was, but very, very rarely. But that phone would be in my pocket, and the damn books got more attention than the phone because that phone had no internet. And then when I got on the internet, when I got home, I was on YouTube because I didn't have MySpace. This was before Facebook. I didn't have MySpace. I never had MySpace because to me MySpace was for morons. I never got it. And I would go online and if I was on YouTube, I was listening to music or I was watching stand-up comedy. Sometimes I would watch movies because in those days it was easier to find free films on YouTube. And I was reading stuff online. I was reading news articles, or I was reading articles on history, ancient Roman. I was very fascinated with the Celts. I was fascinated with ancient history. I was fascinated especially with Mormon history. That was a big thing for me, was Mormon history. I read a lot about the Mormons and what they were doing in the past. I read a lot about Islam. That was another big thing that I was interested in. And I was also very interested in Christianity. I was very interested in learning about evolution and Darwinism. That was a huge interest of mine in those days. Still is. And while I'm definitely more knowledgeable about certain things than I was then, my brain was better at processing information. I think I was better at reading in those days than I am now because I didn't have social media. So I think that social media has literally rewired our brains and has changed the physicality of our brains. That's what I believe. Because in those days, I could play video games for hours and I would still be able to read pretty easily. Whereas nowadays, I mean, but my point for saying that is that video games had nothing to do with it. I don't think video games ruin our ability to read or our ability to be articulate. I don't think video games impede our articulation at all. I think video games actually could help us because video games can help us think. And I'm not talking about like, I don't know, getting on GTA and just shooting people. I mean, like actually playing a game with a story and with missions and things like that and with puzzles. Like in those days, I was playing Resident Evil, which is a thinking game because there's puzzles and you have to move around and, conserve ammo and all that. You have to think. When you're playing video games, you're thinking. I was playing a lot of I was playing Gun, which was a game. It was kind of like the precursor to Red Dead Redemption. It was like one of the first cowboy video games. What else was I playing? I was playing like the Call of Duty game. I was playing all that stuff. And Gears of War was a big one. I was really into that. And that did not impede my ability to read fluidly. My ability to read fluidly was not hindered until I got into social media. That's what ruined my brain, was social media. Social media has rewired our brains and it has made us easily distracted. Very easily distracted. I don't think YouTube is as bad, although YouTube can definitely suck your time up. But I don't think YouTube impedes your ability to articulate or your ability to read. But I think you can be on social media, but you have to moderate your time. You have to moderate your time. And that can be very difficult, especially if you're constantly seeing pages and posts that pertain to your interest. You're constantly seeing it. You're constantly just getting that stimulation. But you want that. You want to retrain your brain. This is what I've been trying to do lately. You want to retrain your brain to really see reading almost like it would see post on Instagram or post on Twitter or whatever. So right now I'm trying to rewire the rewiring, and that's difficult. When I first heard about Facebook, I didn't get it. And then in 2000, and I want to say I got Facebook in, I think it was in like 2009 or 2010 is when I got Facebook. And the only reason why I got Facebook was because it was just easier to communicate with people that I knew. It was before that I was just using Gmail, and I was using the instant messaging on Gmail, and I was using the email, obviously. But then I got into Facebook, and then I realized like I can connect with people, and I could just like email them, message them all on the same page, and it was so much easier. And yeah, Facebook makes it just way easier. And plus, instead of asking people for their email, you can just look up their name on Facebook, and you'll more than likely find them. So I just got into that big time, and it just totally pulled me in. And I didn't realize it at first, but then years later, I'm like, what the hell? Because then I started, let's see, in late 2010, that's when I started reading seriously again. And I remember I had like a gigantic can of coins, a jar of coins. And I remember going to the Coinstar machine and converting the coins into paper money. And then I got like $200 worth of coins out of that. This is from just, I don't know, like 2 years of just collecting coins from change and things like that. It was like it amounted to $200. I took that money and I went to the Barnes and Noble and I got 2 books. I got Herodotus's Histories and I got Edward Gibbons's Decline and Fall, which was a summarized edition. But nonetheless, it was it was the essence of the book, right? So it was Edward Gibbons's Decline and Fall, but it was reduced a little bit to make it a smaller volume, to make it into a single volume. And I remember I sat down and I tried to read Edward Gibbons, and it took me about 3 or 4 hours to read the first 30 pages. And I was like, damn, why is it so difficult for me? And in all fairness to myself, I think it was because Gibbons because when I was reading those books in high school that were easy for me to understand, those were all modern books. And when you read modern books, it's especially written for general audiences, they're going to be easier to understand. So here I was, I hadn't really read anything seriously in a long time, and any books, that is. And now I'm just going to force my brain to read one of the most prestigious books on Roman history within modern times, Edward Gibbons's Decline and Fall. And it's a book that's considered to be advanced reading. So here I was trying to push myself to read this book, and almost like it was like in every other sentence or in every third sentence, there was a word that I never heard of before. So I had to constantly go to the dictionary, look up the word, find out what it meant, and then read the sentence again, be like, oh, that's what he's trying to say, and then continue read up. You find a new word that you don't understand. Go on the dictionary, read it, learn a new word. And after about 4 hours, I remember just getting up and like feeling tired, like feeling fatigued. It's amazing how much energy your body burns when you're reading. It's amazing. It's actually a workout for your brain. Your brain is a muscle. We tend to forget that. We always want to work out our biceps and our triceps and our abs and our glutes and our delts, and we want to work out our calf muscles or whatever. But we forget that the brain is a workout. The brain is a muscle. And how do you work out your brain? You work out your brain by figuring things out. And reading is figuring things out. Reading is probably the most convenient way of working your brain out. And what's crazy, though, is I started reading a lot. So I didn't read all of Edward Gibbons, but I read a good chunk of it, and then started reading Herodotus's History. I think I read the first 4 or 5 books of his history. And then from there, I started reading Diodorus Siculus, and I started looking at Livius's History of Rome, and got a little bit into Machiavelli. But I just started reading more and more. I started reading a lot of books on the Crusades, and I told myself, because I was learning all these new words, and then it clicked on me as to why we have filler words. Why, for example, in America, our filler words are like and Those are our 2 fillers. And every language has fillers. In Spanish, it's como or este. In Arabic, it's yani. If you ever listen to Arabic, you will hear that word every few words. It's yani. Yani. Yani is a filler word. I forgot what it meant, but it's a filler word. Basically, a filler word is are words that we use or terms that we use to sort of fill up the gaps where we don't know what words to use. So if I say, well, I was in there and I was like, damn, what's going on? which is fine. I mean, it communicates the point that you're trying to convey, but the reason why you're saying it in that manner is because you don't have a word in your vocabulary to use. So instead of finding the word in your brain's dictionary, you're just going to say, man, I was like, you know, and it's a way for us to communicate without having to dig up for words. Every language has this, and I don't think we should shame people for using filler words, because filler words can be very helpful if we don't have a word. But I think that we should definitely strive to reduce our use of it as much as possible, unless we have no other choice. And that's very difficult because that requires reading and learning new words. Now, one thing I noticed, though, is I would read all these books and then I would learn new words. And I was like, wow, I'm learning. There you, I just used like. I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm learning all these new words. And I need to start applying them in my articulation, in my communication with people. So I started a list, and I had, I would write down a new word that I learned, and then I would write down the definition. And then what I would do is when I would write, be they articles or when I was writing my book at that time, I was always looking for new words to use. Well, what's the different word I can use to apply for a particular situation that I am recounting or that I am describing? How do I, what there you go. I just said it, I just said it right there. It's second nature to us. I was thinking, what words can I use more? What new words can I use, as opposed to using the same word for a particular situation over and over again? So I would go back to my little dictionary that I wrote. I would go to my list of new words and I would say, okay, I can use this word or I can use that word. And I would start applying it to my writing. And that translated to speaking. So the way that you reduce the use of filler words is not just by reading, but it's by reading, learning the new words, looking the words up in the dictionary, writing those definitions down or trying to remember them as best as possible, and then trying your best to apply them either when you're having a conversation or when you're writing. I think when you write and you apply new words that you've learned, it translates easier into actually having into conversation, as opposed to learning the new word and then immediately trying to use those words in conversation. If you can do that, fine, and that's 100% possible. But if you can write and apply those new words, it's just easier to remember their applications. So, but I think that we have to balance ourselves between social media and reading, and that's very difficult. That's very difficult. But just trying to reserve at least 30 minutes of our day for reading, I think that's really helpful, because reading is so helpful. It's so helpful for you as a human for different reasons. One, it helps you with conversation. Having conversational skills is really helpful for anything, because if you can sit down and have a conversation and you can bring up things that you've learned, if you can bring up history that you've learned, that can be really fascinating. Or I don't know, like you could be reading about any sort of topic, and to bring those topics up in conversation, it makes for really good conversation, and people would be having a much more enjoyable time talking with you. I don't know. I think it's really cool. And then also reading helps you learn about human society. And when you hear the news about some kind of bullshit, like, oh, there's riots, or oh, there's like some, I don't know, there's some nationalist movement or whatever. People who don't read a lot, they just they go on Facebook and they read the news, or they're just reading memes or whatever, looking at memes. They're just going to fall for it, like a lot of people did. Oh, refugees are coming. Oh my God. Oh, and then you see the nationalist movements and you're like, what the hell is this? And the people who don't understand the history of these sorts of movements they're not going to understand it. They're going to think that these people are heroes. But if you actually look into the history of nationalism in Europe, you'll find very similar patterns. And so you can, I think, be ahead of the ball game when you're reading. I think that's one of the probably the most helpful aspect about reading. So yeah. So anyway, I'm going to read y'all's comments here. BlackBerry, yep, I remember that. Hold on, guys. You guys brought a bunch of stuff here. Oh, debating is pointless. Are you sure you're not Biazad? Because I'm pretty sure Biazad said the same exact thing to me. That the church already decided it. The church decided it, guys. Yeah, when you're reading it, definitely. I don't know about IQ. I don't know much about IQ, but I think it definitely helps your neurological system. Reading also keeps your brain active. It's a good way to keep your mind active. I think dementia is caused I think I could be wrong about this, but I've heard that dementia is caused by inactivity of the brain. So just sitting there on a couch, you get dementia. Helps keep the brain active. The author is literally in your. Yep, that's true. I think reading, like I hear these people who say, "Oh, I can read one book a week or something like that," and it's like, I really have difficulty believing them. Either maybe they're reading like, I'm using the word like a lot. Maybe they're just reading books that are quadruple spaced and that are really easy to read. But for example, I'm over halfway done reading Thucydides, and that book is a little bit challenging, actually. And I'm slowly reading it. I try to understand what I'm reading on the page. I try my best to. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult because in the ancient times, in ancient days, they wrote in a style that was a little bit, what's the term? It was a little bit tedious. This was my biggest problem with reading St. Augustine. But yeah, I think you should read it slow and just understand what you're reading. Yeah, definitely. I think that definitely is a better strategy. If you can read fast and understand what you're reading, then by all means do it. But if you're reading fast and not really absorbing a lot of the information, then I just don't see the point of that.